Welcome! I'm Johan Nilsson.
And I'm Lincoln Murphy, and this is Impact Weekly.
We're here to help you make your customers successful. Each week, we answer your most pressing customer success management questions by relying on our years of experience with companies around the world.
Let's get this going. Hey, hello everyone. Welcome back to Impact Weekly. So, we're back another week, another question. And today we're going to talk about churn analysis. So, this is the question, Lincoln, we got. I know we should do some type of churn analysis, but I don't know where to start. Can you point me in the right direction?
Okay.
Churn, it's always a big question we get, and I think this one comes up a lot. And maybe this time of the year, this year, it's a bigger topic than it's been for a couple of years now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, churn, unfortunately, has become a bigger issue than it had been for a while.
But let's do like we always do here and zoom out a little bit and where is this question coming from and how can we help people that have this that want to do something in this area?
Sure.
And I know, just from my side, I know this, talking to a lot of heads of customer success and leadership teams, I know this can be, it can be a hot potato, this one, that sometimes in some companies, churn is something people almost pretend we don't have a problem with. That can be the case. Now this time of the year, this year 2023, we might be a different scenario, but so it can be a situation where you're coming from pretending that this hasn't been a problem, and now all of a sudden maybe there is a higher churn rate, and you need to spend some time on this.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, people have been hiding from churn for forever. As you point out, it's harder to do it when there's a lot more scrutiny on everything that's going on inside the company. So where there's some financial insecurity or where there's just market uncertainty, now it's like everything is getting looked at a lot closer, and churn obviously is one of those things. So you can't really hide from it anymore, nor should you have ever been hiding from it. And I think one of the other things is sometimes companies will say, well, we don't have a lot of churn, so I don't really need to worry about doing this sort of analysis. I don't need to, it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. But to me, it's like, do you have any churn? Yes. Okay. Then that means you are spending money to acquire customers that are not going to stick around. That means you are spending money to work with those customers. It means you are spending your valuable resources, like your CSM's time, to work with customers who will then churn out, which means they're not working with customers that are going to stay or should stay. And so even if you have what you might consider to be a low amount of churn, it's still something that you need to look at and make sure that you have a good grasp on what's going on there. The idea of just zero churn is probably not realistic for most companies, but any churn that you have, you need to make sure that it's something that is, not being a drag on the growth of the company, on the success of the company, on the success of your team, all of those things.
Definitely. And in my experience also that when you actually do the churn numbers, you run them, they are usually a bit higher than your gut is telling you. And my experience is that it's a little bit of an aha moment also when you actually look at the hard data on your customer base there with regards to churn. So it can also be that even though you don't think you have a problem, you might be a little bit bigger problem that you actually than you actually think.
Right. Well, that's the whole point of doing any sort of analysis. You do that because you don't necessarily know what's going on, so you figure out what's going on. And sometimes we discover something that, gosh, things aren't as good as we thought they were, or not to be totally pessimistic, but sometimes there are issues, and it's just like anything. If you can figure out what those issues are, you can solve for them, and they stop being issues. And I think that's kind of a bigger idea around churn that we need to address, which is churn isn't the problem, and I think that's something that can be like, what are you talking about? Churn's obviously a problem. Well, churn is just the result of something else that's happening. I like to say it's the symptom of an underlying problem. So churn is, yes, it's not something that's good, but it in and of itself is not the problem. The problem is something that's causing the churn, and that's what we need to figure out what's going on there. So we have to be honest, intellectually honest about what's going on in the company. Here's the churn that we have. Be realistic about that. And now it's time to figure out, why is this churn happening, so we can solve for that underlying issue that churn is currently a symptom of.
Yeah, that's really important. And I think also here, like we always like to do, bring this a little bit back to the why, because why should we be doing this? And I think sometimes we just look at, we churned a customer, it was a small customer, it was this much ARR and so on. Let's move on. But I think we need to also realize that there is a lot of cost associated with churn. It's not just that you kind of lost one customer or one part of the annual recurring revenue, but you also it has a lot of other costs that are more or less obvious that you need to consider as well when you have churn.
Yeah, and I think that's where you have to address this idea of good churn, which you will hear some people say. Look, if I know where people are coming from when they say that, and it's usually like, well, we had a customer that wasn't a great fit. They were taking more resources. They weren't paying us very much, and so they churned out, and that's good riddance. Well, sure, I see where you're coming from on that, except it, like we said earlier, it costs money to acquire them. It costs money and resources to work with them while they were a customer, and when they left, did it even pay back what it did they stay long enough to even pay us back for what it cost to acquire them? And then on their way out, did they leave bad reviews for us that we now have to overcome in our sales and marketing efforts? So there's a lot of cost associated with churn, far and above just the revenue that they're taking with them. Exactly. And I think no churn is good. I guess you could have it's sort of a spectrum, right? I mean, some churn is worse than others, but we need to get away from that idea that any sort of churn is good. It's not. It's at least neutral, but mostly it's bad.
Definitely.
It's never going to be good.
Yeah, and especially like you mentioned there with reviews, and also if your total addressable market is limited, there is a piece of that market that's left now, and it will be a long time before you get that back. And also if we look at the opposite to churn, having a customer thriving with you, expanding, growing year on year with you, the difference there is huge. And I think that's also, it's not just this revenue we lost here and now, but it's also a bigger cost around it for the company.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you can start looking at things this way and understand that, okay, having customers that leave is not, it's never going to be an ideal situation, then I think you start to come around to this other understanding of, I need to have a good grasp on why this churn is happening, on why they're leaving. And that's where we kind of get into the heart of the question here, which was, I know that I should be doing some sort of churn analysis, but like, how do I even get started? And I think, look, like any sort of analysis that you do, you can go into some really great depth and do some really, amazing analysis that's going to take a long time. That's going to be something that you keep putting off because it's so complicated that you never do it. So what I suggest is starting with something a little bit simpler, and that's our churn classification system. We'll talk about this in more detail in a second, but just to kind of set the stage, we have basically 4 categories. In the simplest terms, just 4 categories of churn, and they're really broken down into 2 groups. Sort of whether or not this was expected and whether or not it was avoidable. And so there's these two classifications in the avoidable. It's avoidable and unavoidable, and then 2 in the expected, which is expected and unexpected. Right. And we'll talk again in more detail on that in just a second. But basically, we just want to find a simple way, to look at the churn and that can give us a quick high level view of whether or not we're spending a lot of time in the wrong places and whether or not our systems are set up correctly. So again, we'll talk about that in just a second, but wanted to kind of put that teaser out there to talk about those 4 types of churn in the churn classification system. Definitely. But I think before we jump into that, there's something that you brought up before we started recording, which is the idea of analysis and false data. And I think there's some really interesting things we need to talk about there.
Yeah. And I think this also comes back to the reason we get this question, because if this was something was very easy to do and very straightforward, I guess we wouldn't get a lot of questions on this topic. So I think an obvious problem here when we do churn analysis is that it's easy to end up with some false data or false insights, because there will be if you and I think you should do this, of course, you should always talk to the customer success manager looking after the account, get their story, what happened here, but there's many ways that information can be biased in some way, intentionally or not. Of course, most people want to just be straight shooters and tell it as it is, but there can be many reasons that what the story you get or the information you get is not actually the facts behind. So that's, I think, one part of it. And also, asking the customer it's another problem here, especially if they haven't churned yet, but they have maybe canceled on you. If you ask them for information on why they're leaving, you will also not get, in most cases, the truth either. They usually just want to leave them. They just want to be left alone in their decision, and they'll probably let you off the hook with whatever it takes to get you off the hook there.
Right. I mean, exactly. So like they're gonna, if you ask somebody who's basically already made the decision to churn, why they're churning, they're basically going to give you whatever the answer is that would keep you from probing any further or trying to save them. So, you'll probably get a lot of answers around budget. We had some budget cuts. It's very hard to argue with something you can't actually have any direct insight on, right? You don't have any money? Okay. There's not much I can do about that. So, the best way to get good intel is to talk to a customer after they've already churned, and after they've, after they're done, because they'll be more likely to tell you the truth, because there's no chance in you trying to get, to save them. That's a relatively low percentage activity. Even like the professionals that do that really do that kind of work only, they still only have about a 20% hit rate on getting people to talk to them. So, just know that that's a relatively low percentage activity. But I think you bring up a really interesting question or issue, Johan, and that's the idea of subjective versus objective data or insights or whatever here. And I think, I do generally want to know what the CSM thinks when we're talking about this churn analysis. So I want them to tell me whether or not they thought this customer churn was avoidable or unavoidable. I want them to tell me if it was expected or if it was unexpected. I also want to look at the data.
Yes.
And I want to see what the data tells us on that. And then I want to compare those things. If the CSM says, this was completely unexpected, and it was unavoidable. But the data says it should have been expected, and it was, according to their success potential checklist, they had success potential. They were not a bad fit customer. Therefore, this actually was avoidable.
Yeah.
Then I'm not saying the CSM is wrong. Like, I'm not going to blame them. What I'm saying is something's off, because the data shows one thing and the CSM is saying another thing. What's wrong there? Where's the delta? Where's the disconnect? And I think that's a very valid, like, that those are both valid results of that analysis.
Yes.
But in terms of what you do with that, you take that and you try to figure out where did we miss the mark? Why is our system saying one thing or not saying something, and the customer success manager feels like another? But I think this means we have to talk about these classification points a little bit more. Go ahead.
Just one thing there about subjective and objective, and having a delta between what the customer success manager is saying and what the data is showing. I think that's also, if you have a difference there, it can be that you are measuring the wrong things and the signals are wrong. It can also be, which is good, because then you can fix that and you can get more accurate, right? On the other side, if there is a big difference there, you might also want to look at the culture you have here. Because if a customer success manager gets very much blamed for surfacing the reality of the situation, they will of course try to tend to move it to unavoidable, unexpected, and so on. So I think it's also, if you have a lot of discrepancies there, it might be that you have to watch out what kind of culture do you have around reporting on churn and blaming. How do you blame people, or how do you hold people accountable, and how that works? Because if you want transparency here and you want people to surface, and this goes of course outside of churn analysis as well, because you also want to pick up on at-risk customers and surface those and be transparent there. So I think it can be also a bigger topic here if you have a lot of discrepancies there between the objective and subjective take on the customer.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, that was great, a great addition. I mean, this is in our Impact Academy training for heads of CS. We talk a lot about coaching, and aside from just managing and leadership, but coaching as well. And I think this is where, if you want to get the truth, like I want the CSM to tell me truthfully what they felt the reason was, whether they felt this was avoidable or unavoidable, expected, unexpected. And I want them to tell me the truth. I need to give them permission to do that, and give them, make them feel, because this is how it actually is, that if they tell me that, they're not going to be punished for telling me the truth. That is a cultural thing, and if you want your CSMs to be honest with you so that this becomes actually something that's useful, then you need to be able to get that information from them without them feeling like they're going to get in trouble for telling you the truth. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Johan, because I think so much of what we see, so many of the problems that we see in customer success management and CSM orgs actually comes down to things that have nothing to do with customer success or technology or anything. No. It's culture.
Exactly, and it's lethal, because if you start playing games, if everybody's trying to game the system to not get blamed or to position themselves in a certain way, that's really harmful, and it goes both ways, right? Both from the leadership and the culture, and also how the people will act under that culture. So I think transparency here and intent, real true intent to do customer success is makes a huge difference.
For sure. So before we get too much further in this, I want to real quick talk about the actual classification system for the churn analysis. But all of this is super important. Like, honestly, the churn classification system, without what you just talked about, Johan, is not going to be super effective because you're not going to be getting, the subjective side of it is not going to be accurate. It's going to be whatever, you as the head of customer success, whatever the CSMs feel you need to hear it is, just kind of leave them alone. Kind of like we were talking about what the customers would do earlier, right? So human nature is to basically avoid conflict. Anyway, so I think the churn analysis and classification system, I've mentioned this several times, but basically it comes down to avoidable and unavoidable and expected and unexpected. Avoidable is just that. Like, this is a customer that churned, yet they had success potential. Like, we could check all the boxes. They were not a bad fit. They're still in business. They were like, there's no reason that they actually should have not been successful. This was avoidable. On the flip side, you have unavoidable, which is they went out of business. They got acquired, and when that happens, sometimes it's out of everybody's hands. Like, they're going to switch to whatever the bigger company is using in this case, right? The acquiring company, things like that. So it's just unavoidable. It truly was unavoidable. And then expected versus unexpected. Expected is we saw it coming, right? The handwriting was on the wall. We knew this was going to happen. Okay. Unexpected is we didn't know it was going to happen. We didn't see it coming. It surprised us. And so if you look at that and you kind of put this into quadrants, the best place to be is, and again, best place to be in a bad situation, because churn is bad. But the best place to be is that you're dealing with churn that was expected and unavoidable. Right? We knew it was going to happen. Maybe this cohort of customers were a bad fit. We shouldn't have signed them in the first place. There's nothing we could do to help them. It was unavoidable, and we saw it coming. We managed expectations with everybody. Look, there will be 100% churn in this cohort. Okay. Is that good? No. Is that the better of a bad situation? Yes. Because it really wasn't anything that we could do, and our signaling is right. Like, our systems are working. The worst place to be in this case is unexpected and avoidable, right? So it was avoidable because these customers had success potential. All we had to do was work with them to unlock that potential, and they should have stayed with us longer. They should have bought more. They should have advocated for us. And then it was unexpected because we didn't see it coming. So, like, think about that. This customer that should have been successful churns, and we didn't even know it was going to happen. That is the absolute worst place to be. So that's the worst place in a bad situation. And what that tells you is two things. Like, if it was unexpected, it means, and I use the term signaling, but basically whatever systems we have in place, we're not providing the CSM or anybody else with the intel that, hey, this customer is off track, their health score is low, or whatever it is. Like, that, we're not being able to see that they're at risk. Exactly. And so we didn't know that. And then avoidable means that we didn't do the things necessary to make them successful. They had success potential. We failed to unlock that potential. So you would need to do two things in that case. Make sure your systems are working well so that your signaling is good, and then make sure that you're actually doing real customer success, that you understand what the customer is trying to achieve, and you have a plan to get them there.
All right, so let's answer this question in three practical things that we recommend this person to do. So I'll hit it off. First of all, implement a churn classification system. Make it easy, useful, actionable, and feel free to use our 4 categories: expected and unavoidable, expected and avoidable, unexpected, unavoidable, unexpected, and avoidable. Very easy to use. Get going with that.
The second one I would say is to just regularly review and learn from your churn data. So it's one thing to have created a classification system. It's another thing to actually use it. So just make sure that you're doing this analysis on an ongoing basis, so that you always have some idea of what's going on with the churn that's actually happening in your company.
And last but not least, as we've been talking about, churn is a symptom. You need to increase your investments in real customer success. Prioritize these strategies that really make the real result here: success potential, onboarding, regular check-ins, proactive work, and so on. That's going to move the needle in a big way. Thanks everyone, and we'll get back to you soon. Hey, thanks for listening. Do you want to bring your customer success to the next level? Check out Impact Academy. We have training programs for customer success managers and for leaders in customer success.